What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. We are throwing you guys a little bit of a curveball today. Instead of focusing on week 13 of the NFL season, we're going to be talking about the college football playoffs and bowl season in general. We got the final rankings over the weekend. The playoff teams have been selected. Florida State has been screwed more than any team in the college football playoff era has ever been screwed before. We're going to talk about if that was the right decision by the committee or not. So we'll get into that. We're going to look at the college football playoff, not only from a college football fan perspective, but also from an NFL draft perspective, because this is primarily an NFL podcast, but we are college football fans as well. Then we're going to talk about some of the bowl games that we're looking forward to outside of the college football playoff, because there's some good ones every year. And then finally, we're going to get to Scolds and Bolds to wrap up week 13 of the NFL season. We will go and revisit some of that stuff at the end of the podcast. So if you're only here for NFL, listen to the college stuff too, because we're going to talk NFL draft. And that's going to be awesome because the Patriots have moved all the way up to the 2 pick. So a lot to look forward to. It's going to be a fun podcast. Let's go get Matt and let's go. All right, Matt is here for probably our first and only college football podcast of the season. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, I told the fans in the opening that it was a little bit of a change up today and that we would talk a lot of college football and then kind of get to week 13 of the NFL season at the end. And we wanted to talk about this because the college football playoff committee announced their picks for the playoffs on Sunday after the end of conference championship weekend, which, man, Friday was pretty good. Washington and Oregon was a fun game.
Yeah.
The Alabama-Georgia game was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday night was one of the more brutal sports nights that we've had in recent memory. The Michigan versus Iowa went exactly how you would think a Michigan versus Iowa game would go this year.
Precisely, yeah.
And FSU versus Louisville was just completely unwatchable. I was kind of sitting there Saturday night and I was like, I love college football, but the NFL is such a superior product. And then we got to Monday Night Football last night and I had to watch CJ Beathard versus Jake Browning in overtime to decide that game. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe college football isn't so bad. To be fair to Browning, though, he was awesome last night.
Well,
homie balled out.
I mean, even Beathard didn't really play bad in the limited amount of time he was out there. Obviously, there was a little bit more that he needed to get done, but it's not like he went out there and the offense entirely stalled out.
Yeah, I mean, he would have won them the game with that deep ball to Calvin Ridley if it wasn't for that questionable kind of borderline holding call, bringing it back. So he could have taken it. But so Final Four selected by the College Football Playoff Committee. We got Michigan at 1, Washington at 2, Texas at 3, and then Alabama at 4.
Yep.
And I'm sure that everyone who's listening to this has heard this by now, but Florida State becomes the first ever undefeated Power 5 champion to not make the playoffs. The committee opts for 1-loss Texas and 1-loss Alabama instead. So this has been the hot topic of conversation this week. This is why we wanted to weigh in on it, because it's kind of batshit insane that this happened.
Yeah.
In a way, but how do you feel about FSU getting left out?
So I'm a little conflicted. I do think that on one hand, FSU did everything they possibly could have done to get in. And from that viewpoint, it does seem like bullshit that they did not make the playoff. I also think it's the right call. Don't believe that they are one of the 4 best teams in college football. At the end of the day, I would rather have one team get cheated a little bit and have that result in us getting the three best games that we can possibly get rather than getting an additional blowout.
Yeah, it's funny because we're on the same page here, but it's like a total zag from the media narrative right now,
Yeah.
which is hilarious because, college football is mostly kind of driven by ESPN. It's not like the NFL where it's on like Fox and CBS as much as it is on ESPN. And the show's on ESPN. And ESPN just kind of like talk shit about FSU for a whole week where they're like, this isn't one of the best teams in the country and blah, 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 blah. And then FSU doesn't get picked, and all the talking heads are like, this is a travesty, an outrage. Oh, it's unbelievable. But we kind of landed in the same spot where I think that this is the wrong thing to do, but it's the right decision. Like, I say it's the wrong thing to do because FSU has undoubtedly earned a spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
They have done everything that's ever been asked of a college football team to make the playoffs this season. They have the big out of conference game to start the year against LSU, and they win by multiple scores.
Mm-hmm.
They win at Florida. They play another SEC team on the road. They go undefeated in their conference. They win the conference championship. The resume is unassailable. I think you can make a case that their resume is better than any of the teams that made the college football playoff. Like, they take the big risk. They schedule LSU, who's a really good team. And they play that game while like Michigan and Washington are playing, New Jersey high school and Hawaii and stuff like that. They win that. They play an SEC team out of conference on the road in one of their arch rivals in Florida. Like, just the games they scheduled out of conference are insane enough. They had some close calls in conference. I get that.
Yeah.
A lot of teams do. But they go undefeated, they win. But I'm going to be real with you guys, and I'm going to say the thing that ESPN won't say to you. Putting Alabama in over Florida State is a business decision by the College Football Playoff Committee. It's the correct business decision because, like, whether or not we want to admit it, college football is a business. It's about making money. And you know what's going to make more money is Michigan versus Alabama. People don't want to watch Florida State with their third string quarterback go up against a Michigan team that we presume to be the best team in the nation. Right? Like you just said, we want to watch good football. We don't want to watch a blowout. And whether or not Florida State would actually get blown out, the threat of that looming is going to discourage casual fans from watching that game. You know what casual fans are going to watch the shit out of? Michigan versus Alabama. That game is going to set every single viewing record for the college football playoff this year. Like, it's gonna be the highest watched college football playoff game of all time. And you know what? Michigan could absolutely beat the shit out of Bama. Alabama could beat the shit out of Michigan. Maybe Florida State would have put up a better fight. We'll never know. And quite frankly, no one's going to care because it's not about the actual game itself. It's about the hype for the game. And it's about selling tickets to the game and getting people to watch the game so that they watch the ads. It's not about the product on the field. So it's 100% a business decision. And I think it's the right one. I mean, I do think that Alabama's a better team than Florida State without Jordan Travis. And the committee's job is not to pick the teams that deserve to be there the most. It's to pick the 4 best teams. Like, this is the advantage that college football enjoys that every other major sport is jealous of. You think the MLB wanted the Rangers versus the Diamondbacks in the World Series? You think the NFL wouldn't love to pick the Super Bowl every year? They would just be picking like Patrick Mahomes versus Dallas. Is Dallas the best team? No. Do they deserve to be there? No. But they have the most fans. People are going to watch them. They would get picked. And that's the beautiful thing about the College Football Playoff Committee is they can look at this and say, okay, FSU lost Jordan Travis. People are not going to want to watch them potentially get crushed by Michigan.
Yeah.
People want to watch Alabama. People want to watch Michigan. Let's put them in there. views. Every professional sport is jealous of this system because it allows for things like this to happen. And they took full advantage of it this season.
Some call it beautiful, some call it toxic, but if regardless, like all of those points still stand. And at the end of the day, if you don't think that the number one thing with college football is making money, then boy, howdy, you have not paid any attention to the politics around college football for the last 20 years.
Yeah, and this is the thing is like I do feel for the kids at Florida State.
Yeah.
Like I said, they earned this maybe even more than any of the teams that made it. Like I'm not even saying Florida State versus Bama. I'm saying like they might have earned it more than Michigan did. They earned it more than Washington did. They deserve to be there. But you don't have like the cachet to be there without your Heisman hopeful quarterback. You know? And I'm like, this team is actually good.
Yeah.
It's a good football team, even without Jordan Travis. Like, you got guys who are going to be first round NFL picks in Keon Coleman. You got Jared Verse, who is just an absolute monster.
Him and Coleman, really, both guys who individually they're talented enough that they can take over a game on their own.
Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity too. Like, there's a chance, maybe not a great one, but there's a chance that they could do what Ohio State did in the playoffs years ago. Remember that they had Braxton Miller was hurt, and who was that other quarterback at Ohio State that was there forever? I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, but he played at Ohio State for like 5 years.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Maybe 7 years. But their top two quarterbacks were hurt, and they were down to like Cardell Jones.
Yeah.
And then Jones just like came in and balled. Like,
yeah.
Florida State has the talent around the quarterback position to potentially still make a run. It's the billing of the game, though. It's like, it's JJ McCarthy in Michigan and John Harbaugh versus Mike Norvell, who is like Mike Norvell, awesome college football coach.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best in the country. I don't think that the majority of people could have named or could have told me that he was Florida State's football coach.
Yeah.
You know who people know?
Nick Saban.
People know Nick Saban, and they know that he's the head coach of Alabama. So it's like, and coaches really kind of drive college sports more than the athletes in a way, because the athletes change out every year and the coaches stay the same. So like, it's going to be billed as like Michigan and Alabama, probably like the two most successful programs historically in the like college football history.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sure like Notre Dame and some other schools are up there, and it's going to be Harbaugh versus Saban. And it's going to be, JJ McCarthy they're going to talk about how JJ McCarthy is a first round pick this year. And they're going to talk about Jalen Milroe's story of how he got benched.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe in him anymore. And then he came back and he was awesome and led them to the playoff. And
they'll talk about Sandstro a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a really interesting story. Yeah.
There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys they'll talk about, but this was going to be the problem with Florida State is they're going to have to sell Norvell. They're going to have to sell whoever the quarterback is with Travis out. And like I said, it's just a business decision at the end of the day. It's like, okay, you can make an argument that Alabama's a better team than Florida State without Jordan Travis. I certainly believe they are. And I'm hyped to watch this game. Would I be excited to watch Michigan versus Florida State? Probably not. Just being honest, I would watch it. I'd probably have it on. I'd root for Michigan because I'm from the Metro Detroit area. My friends, Michigan fans. My sister went there. But like, I want to watch good games. Every year in the college football playoffs, we have one game that's really good and one game that's a blowout typically.
Yeah.
Last year, both semifinal games were good, and then the championship was a shit show. And they don't want to have that happen again. Because like, as much as Georgia fans probably enjoyed that, people tuning out at halftime of the college football national championship is an absolute shit show for the sport.
Yeah, it's not great for advertisers, which is the lifeblood of live sports.
So I think two really fun semifinal games this year and kind of, mix and match. I think the championship's going to be a good game no matter what two teams it is. Michigan seems to be the best all around team, but like Washington and Texas is probably going to be a shootout. It's going to be a fun game to watch. And then, whether it's Michigan or Alabama or Washington or Texas, like it's going to be a fun national championship. I think the college football's wet dream is for Texas to beat Washington because either Texas versus Michigan or Texas versus Bama is
Yeah.
like, we're going to set a record with Michigan versus Bama, and then we're going to break it with whichever one of them plays Texas.
I think this is the first time I can think of that we've got 4 quarterbacks going that are pretty talented. I mean, you got Ewers with Texas, Penix for Washington. Like, both those guys are going to be drafted, I mean, before the end of day 2 this year. And then,
well, yours might come back now, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, if he leaves this year, which who knows, obviously that's a really big decision. But man, if you can get that life-changing money now, a lot of guys will just take it. And then obviously JJ McCarthy for Michigan, and now Milrow, who's had an interesting, tumultuous at times year, but like he's had a hell of a story, and no one ever like really questioned the physical talent there. So
yeah,
I think that offers a lot for these playoffs.
I like to watch college football in general, but especially the playoffs from a college football fan perspective, but also from an NFL fan perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I'm a bigger NFL person than college football. Obviously, we have a podcast that's NFL 25 or 30 something weeks out of the year, more than half the year. We're talking NFL football between the season and the draft. So I watch this with my NFL hat on too. And I look at Michigan versus Alabama. And from the college football fan perspective, Michigan's a program that's been building up for years now with Harbaugh to be a national contender. They finally make the playoffs last year, and they come out like completely not ready for TCU.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those games that felt like a quicksand game where you get down 21-3 to start the game. And then they're like pushing to come back, but they just like can't quite get there. And every time you think that they're going to come back all the way, TCU gets a big play. It's like a pick six, or it's like that 75-yard touchdown to Quentin Johnston on a crossing route or whatever it was.
Confused Chargers fans.
Yeah. They're like, what? Quentin Johnston scored a touchdown from 75 yards away? I didn't know that was possible.
How is that even possible? He caught the ball?
But now you go up. So Michigan now goes up against the greatest college football coach of the modern era in Nick Saban. I don't think that's even debatable at this point. Yeah. Is that like in our lifetimes, he's the best college football coach.
Even at the NFL level, like the vast majority of defenses in the NFL heavily use components of his defense.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't succeed in the NFL, but like his stratagems.
Yeah.
I like that word, stratagems. His stratagems did.
He's one of the best coaches in the history of the sport, regardless of the level.
Yeah. And like, say what you will about Bama, but they are a team that wins these games.
Yep.
They've won more college football playoff games than any other team. They've been here more often than any other team. They've been dominant for that long. They win the big game against Georgia. And it's like, yeah, maybe this Bama team's not as good as Bama teams we've seen in the past. Maybe they don't have there's a ton of NFL talent on this team, but maybe it's not like the elite NFL talent, like the Devonta Smiths and the Tua Tagovailoas and the Mac Jones of the world. That was a joke.
Elite Dragon quarterback.
Elite Dragon, Mac Jones, Elite Tank Dragon. So like maybe it's not the Alabama teams that we've seen before, but like I'm not going to doubt an Alabama team in a big game, especially not after what we just watched against Georgia this weekend.
Yeah.
So I think it's fun from a storyline perspective. Like from a draft perspective, you mentioned quarterbacks. I will be watching Michigan quarterback JJ McCarthy like a hawk
Yeah.
during this game. We've talked about this ad nauseum,
Yeah.
but I think JJ McCarthy is going to be one of the most divisive players of the draft this season.
Yep.
I've seen him as a top 10 pick in mocks. I've seen him not in the first round. I've seen him in the 20s. Like I just kind of seen him all over the place.
Yeah.
And he's one of those dudes that has all of the physical tools to be a superstar. Like if you watch his best throws on tape, they are better than 99% of the throws you're going to see from other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like he had that one throw against Ohio State, the touchdown that was almost intercepted, just like a laser right between two defenders. The dude perfect in stride touchdown.
Well, and like I don't know if you heard his commentary on when he was like asked about that throw, but like his response to that like shows that like mentally like he knows what he's doing. He's like, well, yeah, I was watching the defender and then I saw him turn his back and I saw, all right, like, okay, he's only covering the width of his shoulder pads. I can just go ahead and throw that in. Like, you don't hear that from a lot of college quarterbacks.
Elite thought process.
Yeah. So
that should be a fouled out shirt. Elite thought process.
Okay. So that's all well and good. But then you have games where you're throwing the ball 8 times, and it's like, how do we evaluate this?
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't get to the but part of the argument. Like, he has all the athleticism. He can make all of the throws, but his team doesn't seem to trust him to throw the ball against good teams. And even when he does throw the ball against good teams, it's not far. Like, this season, the game that really sparked this conversation between you and me weeks ago.
Yeah.
He threw the ball 8 times in a victory over Penn State. 8. He threw the ball 20 times against Ohio State for 148 yards. He threw the ball 30 times against Iowa in the Big Ten championship. 147 yards. So even when they do let him throw against good defenses, he's not throwing it far. Like they don't trust him. And so it's super hard to watch what he can do versus what he does do on a football field and say that I want this guy in the top 10 or I want this guy in the top 20.
And it's super hard to separate like seeing that from the effect too of like, well, this is just how Michigan plays, right? They've all, especially since Harbaugh's been there, they've always been super run heavy. And most of that time, they just have not had good quarterbacks, point blank, period. So, like, the fact that they let J.J. McCarthy throw the ball 30 times in the game is actually surprising, regardless of how far he was throwing it. But it's really difficult to figure out like how much of what is what because none of us are in that room.
It's clear to see that the upside of JJ McCarthy is higher than anybody not named Caleb Williams or Drake May in this draft. It's higher than Bo Nix. It's higher than Michael Penix. It's higher than Quinn Ewers. It's higher than Jaden Daniels. The upside's there. But it's like, it's the variance band thing that we talk about every year. It's like he has the highest variance of maybe any prospect in this draft of what he can be at the next level. And it's like, maybe he's going to be really awesome and totally worth the top 10 pick. Maybe he's going to be a gigantic bust. I think the beautiful thing about this game specifically, though, is that he might have to throw the ball for them to win against Alabama.
Yeah.
He might have to throw the ball against a Texas or a Washington for them to win the game. And he might have to throw the ball well. And we're going to see if he can do it on the biggest stage. So I'm excited to see that. The other game, Washington and Texas, probably going to be a shootout. Like, just from a college football perspective, Penix and Ewers are two of the best quarterbacks in college
Yeah,
football right now. I mean,
yeah.
Ewers just went absolutely insane during the Big 12 championship game. I think like 450 yards, 5 touchdowns. Penix has been incredible in the Washington offense for 2 years, which like you would not have thought he was capable of this when he was at Indiana. Like just being like a drop back pocket passer. Like he has some mobility, but like
Yeah.
to throw out of the pocket the way he does, like the only guy who's as good at it as he is in NCAA right now is probably Quinn Ewers. So
Well, this is just evidence that living in Indiana is not something that humans are supposed to do.
sorry, Indiana. I just think it's going to be a fun game. Like
Yeah.
both these teams are surprisingly physical. You got first and second round picks like littered all over these teams. Washington has a trio of receivers who like Oduze is going to be a first round pick. Polk and McMillan could also get drafted this year. Xavier Worthy on Texas is probably like a second round pick right now. He's got some NFL upside. Like in Mitchell, the other wide receiver, I've seen him mocked like in the first or second round as well. So
Yeah.
like there's just a lot of talent on both these offenses. Washington's running back Dylan Johnson, as well as someone I'm kind of keeping an eye on. Started the
Mhm.
season really slow and then ran for 256 against USC. And ever since then, they've kind of like really ridden him. He's gotten over 20 carries in the majority of their games since then. And it's added this like layer of physicality to their offense that wasn't there before. And something they like really need and something they're going to have to lean on to win this football game too.
Mentioned it just like a week or two ago, like being in 2nd and 5 instead of 2nd and 8, like really makes a big difference in terms of what you're able to do with play calling. Because then you go from like being forced to deal with pass rushers having their ears pinned back and going after you the next two downs to like everything is still possible for you to call here, and they've got to honor that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think overall, two really fun semifinals. And that's kind of going back to the point of like, yeah, I'm more excited to watch these two games than I would have been to watch any combination, including Florida State.
Yeah.
Right. Cause like Florida State could have been like the 3 seed. You're watching Washington and Florida State, or they could have been the 4 seed. You're watching Michigan and Florida State. Like Michigan, Alabama, Washington, Texas. I'm thinking this 3 game trio we're going to have the two semifinals and then the final is going to be one of the better ones we've ever seen. I hope, because one of the 3 games
Yeah.
always ends up being horrible. I hope we don't get that this year.
I I expect it to be the best one that we've seen. That being said, they'll probably all be blowouts because of that. But
That's the thing. We're going to be all hyped for it. They're all going to be blowouts.
yeah,
Florida State is going to win their bowl game and claim a national championship. And we're going to be like, damn, maybe Florida State should have been in here.
if that happens, I will fully be a Florida State stan.
Has this season and this like whole college football playoff debacle, does it make you like more in favor of expansion? Like, do you make you feel like we need expansion more or kind of not really?
I mean, you've obviously known me for a long time. I've always been more in favor of an expansion. I think 8 teams is fair and sufficient. I don't think it's really changed my perspective on that. Obviously, with the conferences changing, the whole Power Five thing is that's going to change, right? But as things stand now, I think it would make sense for there to be, you know, 8 teams, the 5 Power Five conference champions each get a seed. The remaining three are wild cards, and if you don't get a seat in one of those wild cards, then you don't get to complain because you didn't win your conference. I guess the only argument I would make is that with the Florida State thing, like we wouldn't be having this conversation if we had 8.
I think that's going to be the argument that a lot of people are going to point to in favor of
Yeah.
expansion to be like, well, look, like Florida
Yeah.
State got screwed this one year. They
Yeah.
shouldn't have been left out. And it's like, yeah, it's more of an exception than a rule because usually it's like last year we really struggled to find who the fourth team was going to be.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, we know 3, and then it's also going to be Ohio State. And like, yeah, Ohio State showed they probably deserved to be there because they coulda, woulda, shoulda beat Georgia last year. They were within a point. But I don't look at like 1 year and think, oh, we have to have expansion because of that. I still am, for the most part, anti-expansion. And I think there's a lot of people who know me are probably groaning right now because they're like, God damn it, Adam. We thought this was going to help change your mind. I was reading an article earlier that was like what the college football playoff would look like if we had expansion this year. I saw one of the games was going to be Ohio State versus Penn State in the first round. And like this, it goes back to my whole problem with expansion is like, what has Penn State done this year to deserve to be a playoff team? Like, give me one thing Penn State's done this entire season that shows they should be a playoff team. Why does Ohio State deserve another chance? Why does Georgia and like, Liberty would be there? And like Oregon's lost to Washington twice. Why did they deserve another chance? Ole Miss got annihilated by every good team they played. Like they lost 2 games and it was like Bama and Georgia. They got the shit beat out of them both times. Why did they deserve to be there? I don't need to see Ohio State or Penn State in the second round of the college football playoff. I don't. So I get it that like, yeah, Florida State deserves a chance, but it's like, okay, so we're going to open fucking Pandora's box here and give everybody else a chance too. Not everyone deserves a trophy.
So
least of all, Penn
Pandora's
State.
box.
Penn State does not deserve college. This is the thing that pissed me off.
Okay, here's the thing. We can just make a standard rule. Any James Franklin coach team cannot make the playoff.
I know that Pandora's box is dramatic, right? I understand what you're saying, but like, let me posit this to you. Bowl season sucks.
Yep.
Bowl season sucks. And you know why I say it sucks is because the next segment of the podcast was supposed to be what bowl games are you most excited for outside of the college football playoff? You know what bowl games I'm excited for, Matt?
The playoffs.
No, I don't fucking know because I don't know who's playing. Who is going to play for Tennessee, Matt? Who?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know why?
Yeah.
Because none of the NFL guys play nowadays. And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
We've been over this on this podcast before. You want to sit out, go get your money. I'm 100% behind you.
For sure.
This is a somewhat meaningless college football game. So all the good guys who are going to the NFL don't play. All the good guys who are staying in college football are transferring. Matt, there are over 1,000 student athletes in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's been 3 days. It's been 3 fucking days. So whenever you have like a big change like this, yeah, I say you're opening Pandora's box because people were like, oh, the transfer portal's cool. That won't get out of hand. Let's let Justin Fields play at Ohio State next year. He got bullied by the Georgia baseball team. The transfer portal's out of hand, Matt. It's fucking crazy. I'm using the F word a lot here, and I know that like we have certain listeners who are going to be like, you swore a lot on that episode.
I know you're starting to sound like me.
It's crazy. It really is. There's 1,000 kids in here, and it's like people you wouldn't expect. I did not expect Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma starting quarterback, to transfer, right? He's already transferred before. He came from UCF to Oklahoma for 1 year, and now he's going somewhere else for 1 year. Kyle McCord, the starting quarterback for Ohio State, a team that went 11-1 and is going to the Peach Bowl or wherever they're going to play Missouri. He's like, nah, I'm leaving.
that's actually probably like the best decision he could make for his mental health, because I am sure there are a lot of Ohio State fans who have been sending him direct messages that are incredibly inappropriate.
Oh yeah. No, I don't. This is the thing too. I'm not even mad at these kids for transferring.
No.
You got to do what's best for you, man. Like these coaches recruit kids to come to these schools and say you got to give the school 3 to 4 years of your life. Why?
No.
When you're going to leave for the better opportunity as soon as you get it, right? Like you commit to playing for this coach for 4 years. 1 year later, he's like, oh, hey, Michigan State job just opened. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
If you want to go with him, you should be able to go with him. If you want to go somewhere else, you should be able to go somewhere else. I don't blame the kids. But like we have fully opened Pandora's box with the NIL thing and with the transfer portal and not having to sit out or like redshirt a season when you transfer.
Yeah.
Why is Dylan Gabriel going to play at 3 colleges in 3 years?
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
I don't know what the right solution was to, obviously compensation for players, right? It certainly wasn't what they were doing before, right? Because schools were making tons and tons of money off of them and their likeness and all the years they were making money off of them through the NCAA games, but they couldn't make money off of themselves. Like, not even just like getting played for playing. They couldn't go to a fucking used car dealership and, make money for like showing up there to,
couldn't use their likeness.
They couldn't use any of that.
Yeah.
So
I totally am in favor of these guys getting their money, but like my problem is Missouri plays Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl on December 29th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading lists today of like, these are the best college football games of bowl season ranked. And they're like, number 1 and 2 are the college football playoff games, obviously. But like number 3, they're like the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State and Missouri. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in the draft. And then you got
who isn't going to play.
Right. We got Luther Burden from Missouri, who's going to be the number 1 receiver in the draft next year. And Brady Cook and Kyle McCord and all these guys. And I'm like, none of them are playing.
Yeah.
You got to sell me on the 3rd string quarterback for Ohio State versus a kid from Missouri's student section and tell me that that's going to be a good football game, because none of these guys are playing.
Yeah.
So the points I will give to expansion is that you are creating more important college football bowl games, and maybe if there was expansion this year, then like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyle McCord and all these guys would be like, oh yeah, we're going to see this through. We're going to play these playoff games and try to win a national championship. So I really like it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like the conference realignment in a way, because I was thinking about this. The Florida State argument is like, well, why would anybody schedule big out of conference games anymore? They obviously don't matter. And it's like, you know what? I agree with you. You don't need to schedule big out of conference games anymore, because you're going to have a shitload of big in conference games starting next season. So have fun.
Exactly. Yeah. God, like the 3 conferences going to be left basically are all going to be murderers row.
Yeah. Well, it's like you look at, people are talking about like, oh, Michigan's schedule next year. They're going to have like Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like, what about poor Purdue?
Yeah.
Like they got Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, USC. Like, this is bull, man. These small schools are screwed.
Yeah. It's going to be really difficult for like those schools that aren't like marquee schools and haven't already elevated themselves to ever elevate themselves, because of the level of difficulty that is now like that has been created with these conference realignments, which I don't think is entirely a bad thing, but it certainly makes things a little bit less interesting from one year to the next, maybe.
Well, it's funny too for the small schools is that like they're already getting screwed by the transfer portal because now it's like even if
Yeah.
you do get a good player, you can't hold on to him.
Yeah.
Indiana had Michael Penix, and he's like, I'm leaving for greener pastures. Dylan Gabriel is going to play for every college before he's done. So, yeah, it's like these guys are just going to be gone too. So it's going to be really hard to build if you're not a team that has just like a ridiculous amount of money to give NIL deals.
Yeah.
Like Tennessee, that's the Tennessee route. They're like, Nico I am Lavala, here's millions of dollars. Come play for Tennessee. Doesn't matter to us. So,
Yeah.
that said, we don't have to go over like the college bowl games that we're most interested in, but I did want to say the ones that I think are going to be more fun are like the earlier games where it's the smaller schools that don't necessarily have dudes like transferring or dudes who are going to be going to the NFL draft. And if they are, it's like later picks who are still trying to build their stock up. So I wrote down like the Cure Bowl is actually the first bowl game, December 16th. And it's
Mm-hmm.
MAC champion Miami, Ohio versus Appalachian State. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you may not know the names of a lot of these guys, but like App State is App State. They're always good. And Miami, Ohio had like a top 25 defense nationally this year and absolutely bamboozled every MAC team.
So I actually chose one out of just like pure morbid curiosity. Uh I I chose the Quick Lane Bowl with Bowling Green in Minnesota because Minnesota's fucking 5-7. What the fuck?
They're funny. So they're 5-7. They made a bowl game, and one of their quarterbacks is in the transfer portal.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, all right, like, let's see how this goes. Like, I'm just incredibly curious about this. It's one of those like I can't look away situations, even though like it's probably not going to be the best football.
Yeah, well, you know what the thing is like I have 2 weeks off work here coming up for the holidays,
Yeah.
and there's just like college football games on all day. I'll be watching them
Yeah.
for sure. Like they're going to be fun. I'm not trying to talk too much crap about bowl season because it is one of my favorite events of the year. And I think like the bowls are really good. And then you hit a certain point where the bigger schools start playing. And it's like, Louisville plays USC in the Holiday Bowl.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams ain't playing that game.
Nope.
No way. One game that I do think is actually going to be fun potentially, and it's funny because it's two big schools. The Orange Bowl, Georgia versus Florida State.
Yeah.
We talked about this over the weekend. Is that like, how does Florida State respond to what happened?
Yeah.
Like, they have multiple guys who are going to be high NFL picks. Do those guys sit out, or are they potentially just like, you know what? Screw this. We're playing. We're proving it to the world against the defending national champion in Georgia, who like obviously they're not going to win again this year, but they're a 12-1 SEC school. You
Yeah.
think Florida State doesn't want to take on a 12-1 SEC school right now?
Yeah.
So that's something I could potentially see like a guy like Jared Verse being like, I know I'm going to be a top 5 pick. I know that like it's a seemingly meaningless football game, but I'm playing and we're winning this shit.
Yeah.
And we're proving it to the world and we're claiming the national championship. I want it. I wanted it before the games were announced. I think I texted you this. I was like, dude, give me Florida State, Georgia. I need it. And we got it. So, and if Jared Verse and Coleman and those guys are like, we're going to go focus on our NFL careers, more power to you.
Yeah.
They're both going to be first round picks this year.
But it smelled like bitch in here.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like, dude, after what just happened, you got to do this for your coach. You got to win this game, man. You have to.
Yeah. I will say this is on Mike Norvell, though, because he's not doing enough commercials. If he just did more commercials, people would know who he was, and then it would have gotten picked.
Mike Norvell needs to come on this podcast and tell people who he is. That's what I'm saying. You're invited.
Yeah. Just like Jose Calderon.
All right. You know what's funny is I was driving home from work the other day. I got to go to the office every Monday, and on the way home, I called my dad, and he was just like, you guys really haven't talked about that basketball player that you guys want on the podcast recently. And I was like, oh, I'll make sure to bring up fouled out legend Jose Calderon this week. And he's like, please don't. So I'm glad that you did it.
Damn it, Jim.
All right, let's wrap up with a little bit of Week 13 NFL talk. Do you want to pick a national champion?
Sure. Seeing as I grew up half an hour away from U of M, I feel like I am obligated to pick U of M. So that's gonna be my pick, I guess.
My national championship pick is Florida State. They only have to win one game, and then they can claim the natty. The other teams all have to win 2 games. They have an advantage. This is a good thing for Florida State. I'm going to talk them into it when Mike Norvell comes on the podcast. We'll be like, this is a good thing for you, man. You just got like a ton of fame and a ton of clout doing all this stuff. And now you get to claim a national championship, just like UCF, who actually does have a banner hanging. They thought it was impossible in the college football playoff era. I think Michigan's the most complete team. I think everybody's going to pick Michigan. So I'm going to say fuck it. And I'm going to pick Washington. I'm going to say Washington wins. Just because I like them. There's no analysis there. Washington. I like Washington. I think it'd be absolutely hysterical if the Pac-12 wins a championship and then dissolves forever. So I'm going with that. All right.
That is the best timeline.
Bolds and Scolds, week 13 of the NFL season. It is your week to go first with your bold.
Yeah, so for my bold, I'm going to go with Jake Browning. He did everything that you could possibly ask of a backup quarterback to Joe Burrow in this situation. Joey B's done for the year. Everyone, reasonably so, has written the Bengals off for the year because their offensive line is trash and not having a quarterback makes it real hard to fucking win games. But like, shit, he went out and got them winning overtime and was like basically the reason they won. I mean, he was 32 for 37 for 354 yards.
No, he was like legitimately very good. He was not like backup quarterback good.
No, he was awesome.
That was better than most games that Burrow had this season.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it a little bit. After the game where Burrow got hurt, that like Browning came in and showed some flashes, but now he's doing it over the course of entire games. And like that's huge for him because shit, now he has a chance to actually make a career out of this and maybe not as long, but kind of take the path of, Geno Smith, like, hey, might take me, 2-3 years, but like, I'm going to come in and earn a starting spot. Are you telling me that Atlanta shouldn't be sitting here being like, hey, maybe we try to get our hands on that guy?
Jake Browning was a Husky. It's the Spencer Hawes song all over again. Yeah, legitimately very good on Monday night. I was impressed. The thing I like most about him is that he's like, I'm just going to throw it to Jamar Chase a ton.
Yep.
Needed that. We talked about my horrible fantasy loss with Josh Dobbs last week, the whole debacle of starting Dobbs over Fields and big bounce back win for me, scoring the most points in the league. And Jamar Chase was a big part of that. So I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying Jake Browning's work. He said that if Jamar Chase dropped the ball 5 times, he'll throw it to him a 6th time. Yeah, yesterday. So I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I like this guy. My bold for week 13 is 49ers wide receiver / running back Deebo Samuel. We've talked a ton about the whole Philly versus San Francisco situation this year, and how it was likely going to define San Francisco's season. You shouldn't need a reminder. If you do, Philly beat San Francisco, who was down to like their 4th-string quarterback in the NFC Championship last year after all those guys got hurt. The 49ers whined and cried about it for weeks and months and just talked about it all off season. We discussed it. We memed it. We laughed. We cried. Well, San Francisco beat the ever-loving shit out of the Eagles.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia over the weekend, 42-19, backing up all of the shit they talked. Nobody backed up their trash talk more than Deebo Samuel, who coincidentally also talked the most trash.
Yeah.
Potentially the greatest backing up your trash talk game in NFL history. 138 total yards, 3 touchdowns. We talked earlier. I had Tyreek Hill on my Scolds 1 week this season because he talked a bunch of trash about playing Kansas City for the first time since the trade and then didn't do anything and also had the game losing fumble. The Eagles had 19 problems on Sunday, and they were all Deebo Samuel and Brock Purdy because Brock Purdy was so good.
Yeah.
314, 4 touchdowns for Brock. So,
yeah. I mean, I could also argue that the Eagles had one problem on Sunday, and it's the same problem that they've had the entire year, but have gotten away with for a week. And it's the fact that they have the worst pass defense in the NFL. And I don't even think it's close.
Yeah,
they haven't stopped anyone all year.
Yeah, I said 19 problems because that's Deebo's Twitter hashtag for those who don't know. Yeah, I know you know, but there are people out there who probably don't. Yeah, it's been a problem for them. Brock Purdy exploited it on Sunday. And this is going to be the thing now is like what happens to both these teams after playing such an emotional game and having the outcome they had. I actually I'm a bit concerned for San Francisco just from the standpoint of do they have a letdown game now?
It's was that your best? Did you use the best you have in week 13? Because you're going to need it in January.
Yeah. Well, I think if they did use their best against the Eagles in Philly, that they might be content with that.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm sure from their perspective, they feel like they validated everything that they felt after losing.
Yeah.
This doesn't prove to me that if Brock Purdy had played in the NFC Championship game, they would have won. No. I think you made the salient point over the weekend that this is a very different Eagles team than the one that went to the Super Bowl last season. But I think in their minds, they're like, yeah, we told you so. And it's like, yeah, well, you stood on your business, San Francisco. Right. Good for you. Now you got to move on.
I think it is pretty clear that Bradbury and Slay are both, even if it's just a half step, they're a bit slower this year. And you add that to they lost CJGJ in the offseason. They went from the best pass defense in the NFL to the worst. Honestly, it's miraculous that they've only lost 2 games all year now. This doesn't change any of my thoughts on last year.
Last year stands for itself.
Yeah.
At this point, but yeah, you lost both starting safeties, 2 starting linebackers who were good coverage players.
Yep.
You spent your premium draft picks on defensive line and stuff. It's fine. They have the best run defense, right? They're really good run defense, really bad pass defense.
Yeah.
But you're seeing the problems with that now.
Yeah.
This win really tightens up the NFC playoff picture as well, as far as like the top seeds are concerned. If Philly wins, they have a 2-game lead on San Francisco. Now you have a 1-game lead on both. Like the margin is getting thinner and thinner for them to get that bye. So who is your scold for week 13?
So,
and it's a legitimate question because you didn't send them to me before the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm going with pretty much the entire Jets front office and coaching staff. You put all your eggs in the basket of we're getting Aaron Rodgers this offseason. Okay. Well, I would argue that's a questionable decision in and of itself, but we'll let that slide. Okay, he gets injured on the first drive. And then you're left with Zach Wilson as your main guy for the rest of the year. Okay, well, that's not great because you saw that he was bad all of last year and the year before that. And while he had a few flashes, like trade deadline comes up, he's still been bad, or at least not good enough. You have had 3 months at this point to do something, anything about the quarterback position since Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. And now, after you've benched Zach Wilson, there are reports that he is reluctant to go back into the starting quarterback role. Their front office and coaching staff have entirely dropped the ball on this quarterback position, and they clearly were just planning on like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is going to save us.
They also
any backup plan after 3 months.
They also decided to bench Zach Wilson in favor of Tim Boyle.
Yeah, which if you've ever watched Tim Boyle at any of his previous stops in the NFL, you should have known that that's clearly a step in the wrong direction. As bad as Zach Wilson has been at points in time, he's never been as bad as Tim Boyle.
Yeah, they cut Tim Boyle today.
Yeah.
So you bench your first round draft pick, second overall pick, quarterback for this guy. And then like 3 weeks later, you're cutting him. Yeah. The quarterback room now consists of Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian.
Yep.
We're going to see Trevor Siemian on Sunday. To add insult to injury, you know who not good, but you know who looked like decent on Sunday?
Yeah.
Elite Dragon Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Slinging that thing for the Browns.
He actually legitimately looked pretty fucking good.
It was good for a while. It kind of fell apart. But
so like you could kind of see like that the arm talent is still mostly there, but like the dude's old as shit.
Yeah.
He can't keep slinging the ball that much.
He threw it 44 times.
Yeah. Like if you cap him at like 25, he's probably good. But he was just fucking chucking it.
Yeah, I don't think they had a choice because the Rams looked pretty good again on Sunday. And now we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, the NFC wildcard picture. The Seahawks and the Vikings have now fully blown their leads.
Yep.
And the Vikings, Packers, Rams, and Seahawks are all tied at 6-6 because the Rams put it on Cleveland and the Jordan Love Renaissance continued in Green Bay and they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Should they have beat the Kansas City Chiefs? No.
Hell fucking no.
But the refs had other thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's apparently it's hard to see the receiver that you're watching just get tackled.
Yeah. Tough. You ever think like the refs sneeze or something? And they're this is what I think happens. I just like best case scenario, the guy sneezed and missed the play and they're all looking at him and he's like, oh crap, I don't want to make the wrong call. The more likely scenario is that NFL got jealous of college football and they're like, look at those guys. They get to pick who's in the playoffs. I want to pick who's in the playoffs. I pick Green Bay. The only way.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joe Flacco, not great on Sunday, but you know who he looked better than? He looked better than Tim Boyle.
Looked better than Tim Boyle. Looked better than Simeon.
He played better on Sunday than Aaron Rodgers has this season. My scold of the week for week 13. And this team and their fans was warned that this was going to happen this week. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. We spoke about it last week. They fire Matt Canada. They finally gain over 400 yards. Oh, sweet release. But they only score 16 points against the Bengals.
Yeah.
And we're kind of like sitting here hemming and hawing. We're like, I don't know. The Bengals, like Lou Anarumo is a really good defensive coordinator. Yeah. They're a decent defense. And I said, okay. But next week, if they don't play well against Arizona, we're coming back on this podcast and we're saying that they suck. Well, they put up 10 points against Arizona in a 24-10 loss at home on Sunday. And I know Mitch Trubisky had to come in.
Yeah.
I know. But they had a whole half with Kenny Pickett. And you know how many points they put up in that half?
3.
And then they had a whole half with Mitch Trubisky. And you know how many points they put up in that half?
7.
Neither is a high number. Yeah. Neither is good. Both halves were more points than my favorite team scored on Sunday. So,
I mean, Iowa fans would tell you that both of those numbers are high.
They're like, wait, you scored in both halves? What? We're ready to admit it. Like, they suck. It is not switching out the offensive coordinator that's going to fix this.
No, and like, I think too that, look, Mike Tomlin's been there forever, right? He's heavily involved in, the roster building as well. Like, he's got to take some of this heat too. Like, he's a part of that. He's not the entirety of it, but he's a part of it.
Well, I'm not going to disparage Mike Tomlin on this podcast or say anything else bad against the Pittsburgh Steelers because I need someone to send me Mike Tomlin's address so I can send him a fruit basket because they lost to the Cardinals.
Yep.
And you know what that means? The Patriots, who lost 6-0 to the Chargers. I can't even say it with a straight face. How do you lose 6-0 to the LA Chargers at home? If not on purpose. Masterful tank job by Bill Belichick. Schmeckledorf's Justin Herbert for 4 hours on Sunday, but doesn't win. Like, makes Justin Herbert look like complete and utter shit every time he plays him. He owns Justin Herbert. They don't score. He's like, we're only going to give up 6 in this game. Mac Jones might score 7. We got to play Bailey Zappi. Bring it in. Bring in the secret tank weapon. But yes, the Patriots have now moved up to the second pick in the draft, guaranteeing them one of the 2 elite quarterbacks, assuming that Caleb Williams and Drake May both enter the draft.
Yeah, the only way this could be like a more obvious tank job is if Bill just started punting on first downs.
That actually might make them score more points in case there's like a muffed punt or something like that. It's safer to just let Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones throw the ball at this point because when Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones drop back, nothing good is going to happen. Nothing good.
Yeah.
The Patriots, the aforementioned Patriots, play the Steelers on Thursday Night Football in a game that might end 2-0. It really might. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense, and you can watch our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt, this is usually the part of the podcast where I tell the fans what good college football games are going to be on this weekend. But there aren't any. We have to wait till December 16th for bowl season to kick off. So I guess if you want to watch like Army and Navy this weekend, you could. I wouldn't recommend that. We're gonna go back to an old standby. You got any final thoughts before we close out the show?
I think we need to just have like a full-blown Jose Calderon episode just to spite your dad.
I've done a lot of things in my life just to spite. We would do the Jose Calderon episode. Like, this one's dedicated to my dad. It's all about Jose Calderon and his career, and it would be like the best episode we've ever done.
Oh yeah, we would both do so much more research on that one.
There will be a time, not for a while, because we have the end of the NFL season, NFL playoffs, NFL off season. I think like leading into March Madness, and then the NFL draft is right then. That's like what the schedule looks like. There will be a time where we got to fill like 3 or 4 weeks for the podcast. I think we might have to plan the ultimate Jose Calderon episode. Like the
Jose Calderoning.
How many podcast episodes total out in existence do you think are about Jose Calderon?
Like exclusively?
Yes.
6.
Part of me is like, he just made that number up to be funny. The other part of me knows how much you love Jose Calderon, and you might actually know the answer to that question. So, all right, everybody.
You'll never know.
We will be back next week to break down week 14 of the NFL season.
Yeah, it feels weird to say.
Oh my God. Football is going to be over before we know it, Matt.
I know.
Stuck doing Jose Calderon episodes of the podcast.
You mean you'll get to do Jose Calderon episodes of the podcast?
That one's for you, Dad. All right, we will see you later, buddy.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye,
Mom.